All right, let's get right into it. The race for space today, it's not some straight shot to the finish line anymore. Nope. Think of it more like a really intense marathon, where being able to pivot, adapt on the fly, and just keep up a relentless pace is what separates the winners from everyone else. And you know what? The rules for that race just got a major rewrite. Yeah, you heard that right. The plans for getting humans back on the lunar surface, plans that have been in the works for years, have just been completely turned on their head. What we thought was a clear roadmap has suddenly taken a really, really interesting detour, and it has some huge implications for basically everyone involved in this. And look, you can't really talk about any of these changes without understanding the backdrop, right? This isn't happening in a bubble. You've got the US with the Artemis program, and their big goal is a long-term, sustainable human base on the moon. And on the other side, you've got China, and they are laser-focused on one thing, getting their taikonauts to the lunar South Pole before 2030. This competition, this is the engine that's driving so many of the decisions we're about to get into. So, first up, let's talk about the biggest player on the field, NASA. What they just did, well, it's not a step back. It's more of a strategic sidestep, and it's all designed to let them sprint later on. It's like that classic move, right? Take one step to the side so you can take 3 giant leaps forward. And here it is. This is the big one. Artemis 3, the mission that was supposed to be humanity's triumphant return to walking on the moon. Well, it's not going to be a landing mission anymore. This is a huge, huge shift that completely redefines what was probably the most hyped spaceflight of the entire decade. So the first landing gets bumped from 2026 to early 2028. Okay, a delay. But look closer. See what happens right after that? Artemis 5, a second landing, happens in late 2028. So this isn't just a simple delay. It's a fundamental change in strategy. NASA's basically setting themselves up for a rapid-fire series of moon missions once they know all the gear actually works. Okay, so if Artemis 3 isn't landing, what in the world is it doing? Well, think of it as the most critical dress rehearsal you can possibly imagine, but in low Earth orbit. The crew's going to launch, they're going to go meet up with one of the landers from either SpaceX or Blue Origin, practice docking, and even do a spacewalk to test out the brand new suits. It's all about making sure all this new hardware can talk to each other before you try the real thing, hundreds of thousands of miles from home. Which, of course, brings us to the billion-dollar question. Why? Why would you make such a massive change to a plan that's been in the works for so long? Well, it wasn't a snap decision, and it all boils down to one really important strategic idea. And that idea is strategic standardization. Basically, NASA's decided to cancel work on a bigger, more powerful version of its SLS rocket. Instead of spending all that time and money developing a new thing, they're going to double down on what they already have. It's like shifting from a custom build shop to a high-rate assembly line, but for giant moon rockets. And wow, this chart right here shows you the payoff. The old plan meant we'd be waiting about 3.5 years between these massive SLS launches. In this new space race, that's an eternity. But by standardizing the rocket, NASA thinks they can slash that time down to just 10 to 12 months. That's the heart of the new strategy. Trade a slightly later first landing for the chance to fly to the moon almost every single year. Now, it's not just the big government agencies that have to be this agile. The need to adapt and overcome is just as real for the commercial companies, which brings us to Rocket Lab and their awesome next-gen rocket, Neutron. So, back in January, during a really important pressure test, this happened. The carbon composite fuel tank for Neutron just ruptured. For any company, but especially for one trying to run with the big dogs, a failure like this is a moment of truth. How you handle it is everything. So what happened? The investigation turned up some really fascinating stuff. Turns out the tank was built by an outside company, a subcontractor. And this is the key part, the carbon fiber layers were all laid by hand. That manual process, it turns out, created tiny, invisible weak spots that just couldn't take the kind of pressure Rocket Lab was aiming for. The tank wasn't technically bad, it passed minimum specs, but it just wasn't good enough for what they needed it to do. And this is where it gets interesting, how they reacted. Rocket Lab's fix is pretty brilliant. First, they're bringing all the manufacturing in-house. They're using a brand new custom robotic weaver to get the composite layers perfect every single time. And second, they're beefing up the design right around where it failed. So they're not just fixing the one broken part, they're fundamentally improving their whole process. Now, of course, a smart fix like that still has consequences. This whole thing, the failure and the manufacturing upgrade, means Neutron's debut is now pushed to late 2026, and
let's be real, it'll probably slip into 2027. So yeah, it's a delay. But it's a delay that comes from learning and getting stronger. It's a perfect example of agility in the real world.
So you've got NASA and Rocket Lab making these big strategic pivots. But this idea of being agile isn't just for when things go wrong. It's built into the very heartbeat of the space industry today. The operational pace is just relentless.
I mean, just look at this. This is a schedule for just 1 week in March. You've got test flights for Firefly and a new Japanese rocket, and then just this barrage of Falcon 9s launching Starlink satellites. This isn't some special occasion. This is just a week. This is the new normal. Constant launches, constant progress, no time to rest.
Okay, so let's zoom out and try to connect all these dots. We've seen a government agency totally rethink its moon program, a private company bounce back from a big failure, and an entire industry that just operates at a mind-boggling speed. So what's the big takeaway here? What's the common thread?
It really all comes down to this. In this new era of spaceflight, success isn't just about who has the biggest rocket or the most money. The real advantage, the thing that gets you to the launch pad first, belongs to whoever can adapt to problems and opportunities the fastest. So if there's one word to take away from all this, it's agility. That is the name of the game now. We see it with NASA, who's trading a symbolic date for a much more sustainable high-frequency program. We see it with Rocket Lab, who's turning a hardware failure into a massive process upgrade. And we see it in that insane weekly launch schedule that proves this whole industry just lives and breathes this now. You don't stop, you just adapt, and you keep on flying.
And that leaves us with a big question hanging over everything. In a race where the track itself is constantly shifting under your feet, victory isn't guaranteed to the strongest or the richest. It's going to go to the most adaptable. The only question is, who is that going to be?